Thank you to Josh Baer, Alex Glauber, Todd Levin, and Betsy Bickar, who've given up their Friday evening to be here with us, and all of you for coming. Thank you. We thought we'd get low turnout on a November Friday, and here we are standing room only. So thanks for being with us. My name is Gemma Sudlow. I'm Managing Director for Freeman's Hindman here in the New York region. And for those of you who are new to our firm, welcome. Many of you have done business with us before, so welcome back. It's always great to see you. For people maybe watching online who haven't worked with us or don't know about us, Freeman's Hindman is a result of a strategic merger in January of this year between Freeman's of Philadelphia, America's oldest auction house, founded in 1805, and the innovative and formidable Hindman Auctions and Appraisals of Chicago. We now boast 6 sale rooms across the United States. We have more than 70 specialists representing 52 different collecting categories. And we have regional representatives and offices in more than 15 cities throughout the United States. And we're really building a brand position here that is about meeting our clients where they want us to be. And that is to say, offering a world-class, high-touch service to our regional clients and connecting them to the global art market. So that's my elevator pitch, my sales pitch about the firm. I've been in the auction industry now for about 20 years, and I share the vision of our CEO, Alyssa Quinlan, who joins us this evening, and our shareholders, that we want to be there for you and your clients. So we invite you to give us a seat at the table when you want to do some auction business. Before we dive into the panel, for these esteemed panelists who need no further introduction, I do also want to say one word of thanks to our senior specialist at post-war and contemporary art who's here this evening. That's Aaron Cater. This is your doing to have this all-star lineup this evening, so thank you. I guess, given that I've talked about a little bit about our brand position and the middle market, I'd love to start. For those watching online, it's Friday night. There's been an election in the US this week, and we're kicking off auction season here in New York City. So we'd love your thoughts on what you're seeing and what you anticipate, if you can anticipate anything in the coming weeks ahead.
So the question is middle market.
Middle market, please.
Anybody want to jump in first?
I mean, I could start. So I work for Citi Private Bank as an art advisor, and we work with ultra high net worth clients who are art collectors. So they're building their art collection. Sometimes they're selling. We happen to be, for no particular reason, selling a fair amount of artworks this season. And, thinking about selling in November, we put a lot of thought into timing. Would the election matter? How much would that impact whatever the outcome was? And the auction houses assured us that because the sales would happen after the election, either way, it would not really affect the outcome so much. And I think, what we've found is there's a lot of appetite. The auction houses were very competitive in terms of getting the consignments. I think there's a lot of interest. I think the middle market, the pieces that we consigned in the middle market, I hope will do well. And I think, the estimates are strong. We're not seeing any sort of dip there.
Should we go down the line?
Well, I'd say that the middle market certainly made their feelings known in the elections, sociologically speaking. And in terms of the art market, by middle market, just so we can be clear for everybody in the room, what are we speaking about when you're discussing the middle market? Because I don't even know necessarily.
I think that's a great question. I'd love your thoughts on. If you AI.
You asked the question.
Yeah.
I'm not going to answer it. I can't ask and answer. Yeah. I can't ask and answer, so it's like coming to the auction house. I can't buy and sell for you.
I think middle market's day sale.
Day sale.
Right?
Oh,
Alex?
okay. Okay, no. That's
tend to agree. I've been thinking about the middle market a bit differently of late, where initially the one is inclined to think about it in terms of value, right, and price points. But anyone who's spent time at previewing auctions and looking at day sales and evening sales knows that there are plenty of things in evening sales at price points and estimate levels that are below some of the higher price objects in day sales. So what is the logic between, a lower estimated work being an evening sale versus a day sale? And I think it's somewhat of a qualitative question. I sometimes with clients, I'm an art advisor. That people didn't know that.
You are?
Oh.
Well, my condolences.
Just following in your footsteps. I like to, we'll do this sort of thought exercise with clients, where I'll ask them, what's the difference between a vintage car and a used car? And, I'll remind them that a vintage car is used, but it has been deemed historically significant, desirable, collectible, such that it garners a premium in value relative to what it originally cost versus a used car, which as soon as you drive it off the lot, it depreciates. So, when you look at some of the objects, like I just was previewing the sales today, and you see, a Duchamp ready-made, right? In the Christie's evening sale, it's an extraordinary thing and a piece of art history. But I think it's $2 to $3 million or something like that. There's some things in the Christie's day sale that are, have parity in price with that or eclipse it. So, it's really in many ways the middle market is. It's crowded. There are a lot of things of varying degrees of quality and desirability. There are certainly diamonds in the rough, but so much of what these day sales and mid-season sales are about is just really providing liquidity to the market. And with the expansion of the collector base and the art market as a whole over the last decade or decade and a half, it stands to reason that there's going to be a lot more material being resold, and not necessarily material that's being resold with tremendous appetite to be owned again. So the middle market, in so many ways, I agree with Betsy, is really what populates a lot of the day sales.
Yeah, I would also add that middle market, if we're going to use the sales as a metric, I think it's a great metric. They have the amount of items in these day sales has shrunk considerably. And the reason for that specifically is that during the go-go years of the essentially what we went through of QE, the printing of the money, again, post-COVID, and the inflationary bubble that money can result in all sorts of asset classes, cars, watches, art, stocks, in real estate, so on and so forth. These middle market day sales expanded with a tremendous amount of speculative, particularly younger art, where people were throwing anything that they had bought against the wall within the last 12 to 24 months, and they were seeing returns of 2x, 3x, 5x, 10x over what they had paid. That has absolutely come, happily, to a screeching halt, and a well-deserved one. And I think because of that, all of a sudden, you see a lot of that sort of speculative stuff just either was removed by the auction houses to a large degree, or not even accepted, or whatever the dynamic was. And this is resulting in, if we want to call it the middle market day sales, being a bit tighter, and the offerings being on a case by case sort of average basis, better quality, I think in general, in terms of what I saw as I went through kind of all the day sales at Phillips and Christie's and Sotheby's and here and Bottoms and elsewhere.
Can I jump in? So I agree with everything you guys said, but I have a different answer to the question. It's like the middle market, it's a relative term. So what's the middle market for a gallery on the Lower East Side? It's like, maybe it's 10 to 15,000. What's the middle market for a Gagosian gallery? 1 to 2 million. What's the middle market for Christie's? Maybe it's 1 to 5 million. What's the middle market here? So we tend to make one term as if it applies to everybody, and it doesn't. And I think, in a sense, what it means is based on who you are. And when it says, what do you think of the market, middle market, it means, what about my shit, okay? So what about mid-range? If I'm a gallery, I have young stuff that's at this price, and I have the super in-demand stuff that's mid-price, and the rest of it is my middle. And it's same across the board. So the middle market is not just the auction markets, because not all there are a lot of auction houses. So it means something different to you than to the big 2 or 3, so to speak.
So you're saying I have to recontextualize this crap every single time? It's like who's middle market and which middle market?
Yeah, well,
that's
what's
exhausting. Oh,
well,
my
what's the
God.
middle market for like your clients of where they spend? It's like, oh, it's only 600,000, or maybe for a younger art advisor, oh, it's only 16,000. There's middle markets for all of us where we think, okay, that's a market where I can operate and I can make a profit and do my thing. And it's completely different for everybody in the room. You each have your own middle market.
I actually want to touch or go back, Todd, to what you referenced about that sort of that arc of day sales going up and now correcting. How much of that is about taste? So what was upper middle market, if we keep using these monikers for these areas of the art market, what was blue chip in that area that is going to tail off? What has been top of the range that's going to become upper middle market, lower middle market? I'm curious because many auction houses really doubled their turnover in those boom years. And as you say, that's correcting. I'd love to you guys to kind of talk about the taste element and how that's shifting.
Look, taste is when in most cases we go to purchase something in our lives, whether it's a car, refrigerator, TV, computer, I don't care, almost all the decisions we make, you can line up, 5 different cars you're interested in the same price range or whatever, 5 computers or 5 toasters or 5, doesn't matter. And you're going to buy usually based on performance. Now, yes, you might say I like the red one versus the blue one or something, but fundamentally it's performance-based decision. Now, when we're talking about art, however, we don't buy art based on performance, all right? I can line up 5 different artists and, try to explain why this or that, but it's not performance-based. It's based on something else. There's a different metric, and that is taste. So the question really is, how is taste created? Who's responsible for creating it? And how is taste communicated throughout culture? Now, we don't have time to go into all of that here, obviously, but the discussion is an important one that you're bringing up, because in order to articulate a clear answer and to understand what you're getting at, which is really at the end of the day the crucial component of why does a specific person buy a certain thing, the answer is that is based on their taste. And one of the things that we all do up here in terms of our own advisory kind of things is help guide the taste of clients, educate the taste of our clients so that they can make more informed decisions about the things that their taste has not led them to, not our taste, their taste. Because, I have my own collection, they should have their own collection. Nothing worse walking into somebody's collection, looking around at a couple of pieces of art and having a pretty good idea of who the advisor was.
Yeah, you
right?
can walk in and say that's a so-and-so.
Right.
I can tell in 10 seconds.
Right. And we've all had that experience. And when I teach the kids at Christie's or Sotheby's, I have this little adagio, which I say, which is, as an advisor, you don't want to leave your fingers on the murder weapon, your fingerprints on the murder weapon as an advisor. People should not be able to walk in and kind of know that it was you, if it's well done, I believe. So, but this concept of taste is a really important one, and it's constantly shifting. It's very fluid, and as Josh said earlier, it's based on the context of the individual, so it varies from person to person. There's no way of establishing a fixed, point in space for taste. So it's just too difficult almost to get into right now.
Todd, wouldn't you say that one of the symptoms of the market and the frothiness and just sort of reckless consumption of the last decade and a half is that so many people entered the collecting pool looking at art in terms of performance?
Yes.
Duh.
Well, he's just saying it doesn't deal with performance, and I think, what's interesting is that now as I think about the big sales, in the coming weeks, one of the symptoms or realities of collectors approaching the art market from a performance or investment sort of posture is it forces, especially when it's sort of geared towards speculation amongst younger artists, is it forces churn, right? if there are new artists every season at Phillips, Christie Sotheby's, Hindman, wherever, you're still blue chip is still blue chip, but the mid-market or mid-career artists are the ones who tend to get displaced. And as I look across the sales at the major houses in particular, you don't see as many young names or sort of debut consignments at auction, which suggests there's less speculation. And as such, somebody disagrees. And as such, there is the sales seem more conservative, and the return of historical figures that maybe weren't there as frequently in the past couple seasons as they used to be 10 years ago.
Yeah, I agree. It's not as sexy, admittedly. It's sexy when there's all this new young things to look at. But the reality is, and the problem is that a young artist's job, to me specifically, has always been to develop their own language and then communicate that language to you, and you decide if you want to have a discussion with them, so to speak. A artist who has had enough time to establish a personal language, visual language, is then ready for the auction block because there has been many years, decades, in many cases, let's assume they're still alive, to develop and mature a visual language. But what happens with younger artists, if they get jammed right into auction in a speculative way, like you've been discussing, what winds up happening is if they have that one big sale, like right out of the gate, it gets a good number, whatever that number may be, then they're like almost starting to get locked into no more a situation where they are developing their language, but they are branding and packaging their language at that point. They're like, I've got a thing that works, I've just got to do more of this. And that's antithetical in my mind to the whole reason that you make art in the first place, why it's created. It's not about branding and packaging a language, it's about developing a personal language. Not that those two things can't coexist. I'm not suggesting it's not this or that, it can be this and that, but you need to have adequate time for that to mature. And auctions, as much as I love auctions, so don't throw any rocks at me, can have a deleterious effect on that component, particularly for young artists.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, I think there are, with this sort of decentralization of everything happening, I think what we're seeing is taste is changing in a way, like, because we do the art finance and we're doing the appraisals on the art finance, we see a lot of collections that I think a lot of other people don't see. So we're seeing less of those cookie cutter collections that we saw 10 years ago. The Herstatt painting, the Koons, it was like this prescription, right? Yeah, the Prince joke painting. Not that there's anything wrong with any of those pieces, but altogether they were a package, and we would see a lot of them. We don't see those. What we're seeing, and I think for us, it's really being spearheaded by collectors in Asia, very young collectors. They have very good emerging collections. They're not speculative. They're doing a lot of research. They're working with really good people, and they are fantastic young artists making their way. Will they end up in the canon of art history? I don't know. But right now, they're good. They're not, the prices, they're more volatile than other, sort of well-established artist prices, but that's the trajectory, right? You go through some hoops. Those days of an artist market just sort of climbing steadily, that's sort of over. Those artists markets tend to die, I think. But these artists, there are dips, like an Issy Wood or someone like that, right? But I think the authority of who the tastemakers are is changing, because the city and state-run museums are not the ones always in charge of what is important. And is it even an issue of the art being important anymore? I mean, I think, because it's so fast. You have private collectors, private museums. There are all kinds of things influencing what is good taste.
Well, I think they're influencing what is taste.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're influencing what is good taste.
Raise your hand if you've got bad taste. Anybody in here? It's like we got two honest people. I mean, come on. Yeah, I'm agreeing. What is taste? I mean, does anybody walk around going, shit, I've got bad taste, but here I am in the galleries. I mean, it's kind of like a term that's kind of ridiculous again. I mean, we all think Does anybody, oh, seriously, anybody, other than two of you, think they have bad taste? No, I mean, we consider everybody's a genius when it's going up. They all have good taste. And it's a meaningless term. It's like, I like, French food, you like sushi. I mean, it's like, is it better or worse? I mean, no. It's like, so again, it's a great question, but the answer is kind of a misnomer. I mean, taste for our world means price. Okay? And everybody, I said this last week, everybody in the art market, except for you guys, they buy high and they sell low. And they do the same thing in Wall Street too. So I interrupted. You were about to say something about taste.
I think for so many people, it's much easier to talk about money than it is art and ideas and the subjectivity of beauty and intellectual stimulation. I think the market plays a role in that inherently. In terms of, the speculation around, young artists, it's interesting because while there's certain auction houses that are better known for debuting artists on the secondary market, I can't imagine it's a great business to be in, because if you set a record for an artist and it's $150,000, you're probably drawing the ire of the artist, the gallery, and you're making from a, buyer's premium and seller's commission standpoint less than you are selling a late, Sam Francis work on paper. So I think we certainly see a big pullback in that area, in part too because the primary market isn't as oversubscribed as it was in the last couple of years, and so much of the dynamic of price dispersion, seeing huge prices at auction for young artists, is going back to this idea of the subjectivity of value and cost. Certain people who don't want to play the game on the primary market and are willing to pay an irrational premium relative to primary market pricing because they deem that amount of money not meaningful enough to them to hold back. So you get this big price at auction, and you go from a situation where there's pent up demand and limited supply to all of a sudden a deluge of consignments, which floods the market. And we've seen these cycles play out time and time again. And it's hard to kind of arrest that fall for artists. Somewhat of a non sequitur, but I think another thing I've noticed in the last couple of years, especially coming out of COVID, was if traditionally the galleries, primary market galleries that represent artists, have always criticized auction houses as not acting responsibly or with any sort of concern for the long-term stability of an artist's career. So many galleries just got accustomed to, selling out shows or art fair booths off of a PDF, that when they found an artist or a particular subset of their work that, got traction within the market, they leaned on the artist to make a ton of it and sell it somewhat indiscriminately. So that's all of a sudden you see artists, with homes and cars that are bigger and more expensive than their collectors.
Well, I think what I'm hearing, tastes may be the wrong word, but what's in fashion, and you touched on it, Betsy, when you referenced these sort of cookie cutter collections and the difference. I sort of loved, Josh, I mentioned it earlier at Frieze when you were talking to Frank Cohen, and he just said, where are the American collectors who didn't care what was in fashion? They were passionate about what they were looking at. They were collecting, developing an eye, learning, and hanging these things on their wall for life. And they were being sold at auction when that life ended. And I think there's this other element of the market which is about fashion. And I'm curious to go back to your point about who are these collectors? What does the new generation of smart and the smart connoisseur collectors, who are they? Where are they?
I mean, I think they're everywhere. I mean, we see a lot more coming out of Asia, but I do think there's a different aesthetic. The aesthetic is about youth culture. It's like cartoon based. It's very flat painting or very colorful. It's the visual.
Man, they like cause. Come on. They do.
They like cause.
They like cause.
Right?
Yeah, they do.
Javier Calleja, right? You look at those prices.
I like this market.
Salvo, I mean, to me, Salvo's amazing. I could talk about Salvo for a long time, but I think talking about the Duchamp ready-made, right? Those Schwartz editions, the last one that sold was in the 90s probably, right? Maybe early 2000s. So to get a major Schwartz edition, like there's a reason that's in the evening sale. Those are important. And to talk about your comment on taste, Todd, I think taste is about something that continues to give back to you, whether it's just sustained looking or intellectual food for thought. And I think that's what we all sort of probably mean by taste, right? We want something that's not just commercial.
I want to push back. So Josh said it was good he wanted to have like some,
Conflict is good.
conflict. He wanted conflict. So, yeah.
I said, Todd, you can go on about Alex.
I have to say, I'm like in the middle of
Or
this.
Betsy. Yeah.
No. Well, a few things. First of all, the difference between taste and fashion, okay, or trends, fashion and trend being sort of synonymous. Taste is about development. I was talking about the development of a language. Fashion and trends are about novelty. This year I make a blue one, the next year it's a pink one, the year after that it's a red one. That's novelty, that's not development. So, I happen to like watches, okay? If Rolex puts out a Daytona this year on a gold band with a white face, and next year on a white gold band with a blue face, and the following year on a platinum band with a black face, there's no real development there. This is just novelty for the market to get people to keep kind of buying and trading and moving along. So there's a big difference between taste and fashion, first of all. And secondly, this thing about is taste important, Josh, which you were referring, I'm like, yeah, it's really, really super important. Whether we like it or not, I think the question is, who's responsible for that? Now, taste in the art world specifically.
We are. Then we like it that way.
Originally, though, we weren't. It started off as, there was a very good book by White and White, which starts off by saying in the late 19th century, taste was something that was based between collectors, between a gallery and critics. Critics kind of held sway. They would write a great deal about artists. They could make an artist's career or crush an artist's career if they wanted. And that critic-gallery dynamic went from the late 19th century all the way through about roughly ballparking it, probably the end of the 1950s or the beginning of the 1960s. And there was a switch. Now the gallerists no longer relied on critics, they relied on curators, particularly the curators who were doing the big exhibitions like the Manifestas and the Documentas and the Biennales, the big ones, not just museum people. And then that relationship with curators kind of holding the power, so to speak, the baton, lasted from whatever that was, let's say the late 50s or 60s through the 80s.
So the collectors took over.
And then the collectors took over. Now they have not let go since then. And it is now, for better or worse, and I'm not making a judgment call here, but it is money and collectors who drive the component of taste in the market. And it's no wonder when you go to an art fair that visits to collectors' homes now are like this most important central part of the fair rather than going to the local museums. People want to go see who has what. They want to see the spot painting by Damien and the joke painting by Richard and so on and so forth. That's the most important component. Now,
I like those.
I'm not saying it's bad or it's good or it's right or it's wrong. It's just how things have moved. But in terms of taste and who's responsible for creating that, I mean, critical taste, curatorial taste, the people who are responsible, you can call them gatekeepers or whatever, but who are making the decisions they're making that have nothing or little to do with the market because they're simply not involved. Because Josh's assertion, which is a very correct one for the current collector version that we're in, is the most expensive thing is therefore the best, fundamentally. And we can all nod our heads and say that's kind of where we're at. I would agree with that, unfortunately. But I don't think that that's the reality. When we look at artists who have been rediscovered through time, I mean, I'm just trying to think look at El Greco, okay, 500 years ago, court painter, pissed off the court, lost favor, disappeared from history for a couple hundred years, couple centuries. And it wasn't until the Expressionists and the Cubists rediscovered the elongated forms and the incredibly expressivist backgrounds that he had created, where they were like, oh, there's something there, because it's the artists looking at that work. It's the critics and curators looking. It's not the market. The market followed it. Another artist who you probably all know, Vermeer, right? Everybody loves Vermeer. Vermeer 400 years ago had a modicum of success.
Vermeer would never get a show because he doesn't make enough paintings.
Well, he disappeared.
It's like, but I've got Frankfurt Art Fair and I got Miami.
Yeah,
It's like,
well-
yo, Vermeer, sorry. It's like, I need one now. What do you mean? You only made 27 in like your lifetime. It's like, that's not going to work, dude.
Right. But then the discovery in that wasn't made by the market. And that's the point. There was a writer named, a critic named Thoreau, who was writing under a pseudonym, Berger, in the 1850s, 1860s, who rediscovered this painter named Johannes van de Meer of Delft, and thought that he was so fabulous and in Paris, and began pushing this artist through the Parisian system. And finally, we are even a famous artist in the 20th century like Gauguin, who we all know, the greatest symbolist painter maybe of the 20th century. He showed at the 1910 Impressionist exhibition, and it basically was scorned. They said the work was horrid, absolutely. And it was 1940s, 1950s when this work was rediscovered and finally given its critical and curatorial and later market approbation that it received. So I don't mind the market following the curators, the critics, the artists. I do mind it when it's the other way around, the market trying to foist that as a frontal move. That's where we get into problems with taste.
So the moral of Todd's story is that if it looks like art, you're probably too late.
Yeah, that's in most cases true.
But the market, what happens is like the market doesn't like reward those people that come in looking to invest in art. They never get rewarded, right? Like you look at the Paul Allen collection. Paul Allen was a real connoisseur and knew that art and loved that art and was passionate about it. And those prices were a result of him. It's like this counterintuitive principle, right? I think for us, like people think because we work at a bank, we're treating art as investment, and we're not. We're absolutely not. But when you treat it as investment, you don't make a collection that appreciates. When you treat it out of passion and learning and education and, a real love for the art, then it blossoms financially, but it's a result of the process.
It doesn't start with that.
Right.
Lots of guys watch Bruce Lee movies. Doesn't mean they can do karate.
That's true.
But I always sort of reminded of the fact that a market is only as smart as the people holding the money and participating in it. So, if you have new collectors, regardless of where they're from, who are chasing brands and social cachet and aren't at all interested in historical precedent or context, then the more sort of nuanced, subtle, and artists who are less you're less able to sort of codify them into a signature gesture or aesthetic. Those aren't really compatible with the market, and in many ways, those are some of the most interesting artists. It's like going to a concert. There's some bands that you'll go.
If you're going to talk about Fish now,
I was going to talk about Fish.
you're going to talk about Fish now. Leave.
This one actually works. But they're. Thank you, gentlemen. How much time do you have? There's some concerts you go to, and the band will play the same set every night. And the guitar solo is always the same notes and the same length, and maybe it's great. But at the same time, like, how many times can you hear that show? And there are artists like that, right? Who are just known for a signature move, and it's beautiful and branded, and it probably lends itself quite well to the market, especially if it's a painting and looks good on on Instagram. The more interesting artists and the ones who probably shifted the trajectory of art history are the ones who don't fit easily into a box. They're, it's the equivalent of free jazz or improvisational music, where sometimes they'll fall flat on their face, but sometimes it's incredibly inspired and transcendent. And those are in many ways the most rewarding artists and artworks to surround yourself with, but they aren't easy to sort of distill into an elevator pitch.
And also, you said fitting them into a box, which I find actually the perfect.
You're going to talk about Cornell now?
No, but the perfect verbiage, because so many of the artists like you were naming, and I think they're fine, Callejo and others, they look good in the box of Instagram. They look good on social media. They're made for that. But an all-white painting by Ryman, not so much. Some hyper-minimalist thing, probably Nauman is going to be, what the hell is that?
Sculpture's hard.
Right.
But a lot of this stuff that you're talking about that they're buying, because on the young collectors they are on social media, this art is not necessarily made to look good on social media, but once they understand it does look good, cause would be another one, by the way, they're going to run with that.
I think that's super problematic. I think you're right. I think, somebody like Joseph Beuys, Robert Ryman, right? Those are important artists. And Ryman's market is good, right? But Joseph Beuys' market is not. And he's a really important artist. I mean, Duchamp's another example, right?
So when I wrote 30 years ago, when somebody said, who's the most undervalued artist in the world? And 30 years ago, I answered Joseph Beuys, like a felt suit's only like $80,000.
Still 80,000.
It's less.
I think you're still right.
Well,
undervalued.
I bought one for 30 this year, but it's like, so don't listen to me.
No, but it is. It's still undervalued. And I think you're right. I think it will never, because it doesn't have that unit, there aren't units that can be kind of like sold in a catalog almost, right? So it's problematic. I agree. I agree completely.
I mean, it's also the matter of like fungibility, and especially when you're dealing with unique objects, not additions. How do you talk about a market when you're talking about idiosyncratic and non-homogeneous, units of consumption, right? So artists who work with, something like Warhol or Albers, for whom there are, several variations in scale and color. I mean, those markets tend to be pretty efficient because they're as close to sort of interchangeable objects.
It trades like a currency because it almost acts like one. Not
But I
that
want
that
to come
makes the
back
art
to
look
what
bad.
you talked about, which was criticism. So as the oldest person in this room, and also because my mom was a painter and my stepfather was a painter, so my art world experience goes back to 1960. So I'm like sitting there and like Clement Greenberg would come over to the house. It's like, how many people here even know who Clement Greenberg was? Okay, half of you, but it used to matter, okay? Right now, criticism doesn't matter. Who are the great critics of our time? Marion Goodman, Paula Cooper, Barbara Gladstone. They've taken the role of the critic. And it's not anything bad that they're doing because they're sincere and they love what they do and they're great at it. But the role of the critic, it's gone completely. And, it used to be we were talking about this and went a little later than you think, but it went critic, curator, dealer, collector. Now, the first guy up is the collector.
Yeah.
And that's nothing bad about the collector. It's just where we are.
Thinking through that trajectory or that lineup, I can only speak to auction because that's my experience. But equally, when I came into the market 20 years ago, but before that, was very much nearer where the auction houses were selling to the trade, right? And then that takes on a different phase. Now it's about advisory, right? We're sitting in a room with quite a lot of them, quite a lot of you. I'm sort of interested in what does define this era of collecting for you all. Sorry, that's a really lousy question.
Yeah. Say it again.
Josh, do you want to try? Help me out here.
Betsy, you try and answer that?
What defines collecting? I think what we're seeing our clients do is their collections don't start out with a plan, and we don't necessarily encourage them to start with a plan. So we have some collectors that are, their parents, their grandparents were big collectors, and now they're collecting. Some people who've never purchased a work of art before. And I think what we see is that they don't believe that 5 pieces can be a collection. And I disagree with that. I think 5 pieces can be a small collection and a nice collection.
Do you think collector and collection are the same thing? A great collector and a great collection, are they?
No, they're
I mean,
not.
most people tend to think they're the same.
Yeah.
But they're different, aren't they?
They're different. I think you can form a nice small collection pretty quickly, right? And what can happen is if you spend time educating yourself and you don't have a prescription, a theme will emerge and could and should emerge, usually does. But that doesn't make you a collector, because I think collectors get obsessed. Like, I am not a collector. I don't have that desire to amass more of something.
I thought it was the only one.
Yeah, no, I don't have it. But you meet them and they're obsessed. It's like watches, cars, art. You know, it's the same thought process.
What was the question? Sorry.
I don't know.
I kind of went
Okay.
to black there for a minute. Sorry.
I'll answer it while you guys figure out. It's like I think about this a lot since I report on the art market. It's like the traditional collectors, we're meant to think it's all homogeneous. The traditional collectors, they're still there. The guys that love it, mark it up, mark it down, go to the galleries every week, they're still there, okay? And you've got new people who've come in the market and they bought great things and they filled up their house, okay? Now, we're not sure once their houses are full, if they're gonna keep going, okay?
But are they collectors or are they buyers?
They're there in the market, okay? So it's yet to be clear if they have great collections, they're great collectors. They filled up the room with $100 million or $1 million or $1 billion worth of art. So they're around. Then there's like, we can all agree that the speculators, whatever, I don't say that right, you know what I mean? They're kind of shit out of luck at the moment. Like,
Watch the language there. Watch the
they're
language there.
toast. Like, they bought high, they can't get, so they're kind of out. And then there's this other group that's huge, and it's like the people have yet to come to the market. And that's the biggest group. So you got all four things going on simultaneously. So I think we tend to then only look at one group at a time as if it's the whole market. They're all the Paul Allens when times are tough, or they're all the guys running around buying, fill in the blank. So
But the reality also is that there are so many transactional opportunities and buying opportunities that, you know, collectors can be active and still not visible because, you know, the expectation that they're going to buy from every auction, every art fair, still go to galleries. I mean, if you're dealing with finite resources, both in terms of money and space, you're not somebody who's going to start putting things in storage. You're going to kind of blow your wad pretty quickly there and fill up all your walls. So, you know, there's something to be said too about this notion of pacing. And, you know, Todd, I know one thing you and I have talked about a lot over the years is the importance of front-loading education because the learning curve is so steep at the outset. And I've always sort of thought that what makes collecting, especially contemporary art, so exciting is also what makes it terrifying is that history hasn't sort of organized it into a hierarchy and sort of a tightly organized, you know, canon. So you get to make your own value judgments and nobody wants to feel like an idiot. So it's easy to see taste
those two, they're willing to.
Okay. Nobody wants to, you know, so people end up, I mean, that's where you get a herd or a flock mentality, right? But getting to a point in your collecting where you're willing to embrace something that you don't fully understand, which is to say, spend money on something that has no intrinsic value, that is either so esoteric that's over your head or there's no there, and you'll find that out later, is a pretty extraordinary thing to ask of someone. And it takes confidence and a little bit of, you know, just sort of faith. But in my own experience of collecting, I found that the things that I understood and went for at the outset of my collecting journey tend to kind of die on the wall because as soon as I understood them visually or intellectually, they became closed. And the works that have sort of been the most rewarding and enduring in holding my attention are the ones that sort of have that proverbial itch you can't scratch, that you keep going back to and look at with fresh eyes and a sort of fresh curiosity or interrogation. And that's why education and looking is so important for especially new collectors.
I'm not sure if any of you have had a chance already to look at what else is coming up this season. It's online, of course, and if you managed to see it today in person. But thinking through what you've just outlined, what artists are you seeing this season that you're passionate about or excited about?
No one's jumping in because we all sell that information. And it's like, you know, so no one's going to answer that question
I
without
like
a retainer.
Yeah, I like Andy Warhol. Yeah, exactly.
Basquiat.
One thing I definitely have noticed is that, you know, the traditional like delineations of collecting categories. I mean, we've certainly seen those boundaries become more porous and broken intentionally over the last 5-10 years, whereby like evening sales are really increasingly just about great objects, right? So to see, at Sotheby's a Tiffany window, or to see in a Christie's evening sale, an Ansel Adams, and a Duchamp and Lalonde, and these are things that traditionally wouldn't necessarily all be in the same sale. And to the degree there's a common denominator, they are best in class examples by that particular artist. And it certainly reflects collecting habits that collectors aren't thinking in such rigid terms.
I'm pretty convinced that the Joseph Kossuth Duchamp, and the fact that Kossuth owned it makes it even more valid, that we all love it. I'm saying, man, that's going to BI, because we all, okay. So if I'm predicting, unless there's a guarantee, I'm predicting that if I love it and we all love it, shit, that piece is in trouble,
Because
right?
no one listens to us. But
That shovel is digging its own grave.
we should talk, if we're going to talk about the shovel,
That shovel's digging its own grave.
if we're going to talk about the shovel, we should talk about the banana.
Okay, can I say that I wanted to buy the banana, and I said to my wife down there, there's this thing in the wall, we should buy it. She said, what is it? I said, well, it's a banana. She said, what? I said, well, it's duct taped to the wall. She said, what? I said, it's $100,000. And what was the first of 3 words that she said to me?
No.
And
And the last one was way.
what the was the second word. And I went back to her this week and I said, remember the banana? She said, yes. Like, well, it's going to be fucking $2 million. She said, we should have bought the banana. It's like, now you say that?
The banana is amazing. I think the banana is what brings us all back down to earth. That banana that just says everything about the entire art world to me.
Todd, did you want to buy it when you
I'm
saw
going to
it?
be off your Christmas card list when I get done with this. But
You're not a monkey?
look, Maurizio, all his entire practice. First of all, I'm not somebody who's ever been a fan of like jokey art. Not that humor can't exist with art, of course it can, but I've never been a fan of overly sort of one-liner jokey art. Somehow, Prince's best work we were talking about seems to elevate over that. Most of Maurizio's canon doesn't. This piece particularly seemed, I was involved at a particular time in my life with one client of accessing and purchasing a lot of a particular kind of artwork called arte povera. And arte povera was something that came out of post-World War II Europe when everything had been destroyed. And these artists were like having experienced the bombings and the watching burning bodies and everything. Like, what kind of art can we make after that? What can you make in response to that that's even remotely has the depth to communicate my feelings about these incredibly profound, horrific experiences? And out of that came arte povera, which sounds like poor art. But what it means really is impoverished art, art that is made with the most impoverished of materials, rather than the fancy materials of oil and canvas and marble for sculptures and so on and so forth. I'm going to just make art out of literally what I can scrounge. And by doing that, I'm kind of beginning to rebuild a new world out of this horrific time that we went through with the war, this total destruction. And so out of this movement, and there were artists from different countries, but it was mostly an Italian-driven dynamic. Now, that's the background of which Maurizio's work comes out of, this art povera, and using the simplest, potentially, of materials. And he sort of turned this on its ear by making the golden toilet for the Guggenheim. It's using the most non-impoverished sort of material, gold, kind of thing that's held the greatest value. And
Remember
turning it into,
when the Guggenheim was asked to lend the president at the time their Van Gogh, the curator said, well, we can't do that, but we'll lend you the golden toilet.
yeah. So the banana for me is sort of like everything that's in really good art povera is able to take a simple material and transform it through some incredibly magical alchemy, which I don't even understand or can't explain, into a statement that is very meaningful and profound. And I can think of certain artists like Fontana with his slashes, which relate to his time as an ambulance driver during the war when he saw the bodies ripped open and cut open. That's those slashes deal. They are in the with the bodies he saw. And Alberto Burri with the torching dealt with the bodies he saw that were burned in the bombing and the fires. But then when I see the banana on the wall, it seems like there's a complete absence of context, a complete absence, more importantly, of content. And it's just like a riff, which is what I was talking, the difference between novelty and development for me.
So much content.
Finally,
There's
we
so
found
much
stuff to
content.
really disagree with you.
disagreements.
I'll let Alex talk,
But
but I'll tell you why.
And I hate that I'm now defending this, but go for it. Todd, if Arte Povera was really about, holding up a mirror to the post-war life and just how it savaged, humanity, the notion that the Catalan banana was debuted at an art fair in Miami, the absurdity of the context, it really does. I don't necessarily like what it exposes or says about the culture and field that we're active in, but it definitely captures it.
I think it says what you're saying it does. I agree with you, but it's a one-liner. There's no
It's
more than that.
succinct.
It's
It
just,
doesn't need more than that.
yeah.
Isn't it also a fall back to some of his earlier work when he taped Massimo
He's a political artist, and
onto the wall?
it's
like to be.
unfortunate that this is coming out at a moment where people are like dogging the art market. It's a terrible moment for this to come out because the whole dynamic and the talk is going to be a fucking banana was $1 million right when the world is seeing the headline art market tanks. It's not a service to us all to have this in a moment that art's being questioned. It's really bad news, but which is one view, but I think Catalan is actually as much a political artist as those great artists you're talking about. When he's got the big finger outside the stock exchange in Milan, he's like taking it on.
It sounds like, what's the difference between political commentary and trolling? And is there even a difference in this day and age? I think there's a chance that it sells for a lot more than it probably should because, some, in a way, not dissimilar from the quote unquote Da Vinci that Christie sold. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that if its value is derived in some way from the amount of attention and cultural resonance it had first when it was debuted and now again coming back to the market, if somebody's looking to buy that and put it in a private foundation or a museum in hopes of, drawing eyeballs and ticket sales, the more they spend on it, the more absurd it is and the more it captures the zeitgeist, it just becomes this.
It's kind of self-fulfilling at this moment. I wish it wasn't on the market now because of that. All right. That's what you were going to say more.
I don't feel so protectionist about the market. I think I feel like more of an impartial observer. I feel like, the audience is participating like any good conceptual artwork. And, it's called the comedian.
I want to know how they toured it. How do you get that banana through customs? And do you have to buy locally? And then is that, what is the certificate of authenticity and the instructions say?
Well, it's funny because I was actually on the train earlier with some people who are not in the art world, and we were talking about the banana. And I was explaining it to them, and, I was saying, you're buying the idea. You're not buying the banana or the duct tape. You're just buying the idea. They're like, well, how do you know, that you're buying the right banana, or could you just make another banana, or, and they said, oh, it's like those NFTs. And they're not wrong, right? You're buying an idea, you're buying a concept, and conceptual art has been around since, I don't know, better than I, 60s, right? 50s. But I think it is so intertwined with the market. The fact that it is part of the market makes it brilliant.
On this exciting note where we're all disagreeing with each other, I would love to turn it over to some questions, and I'm hoping they're better than mine. So who would like to go first? Don't be shy. Everyone's being shy. Here we go. Great. Thank you. Betsy, do you mind sharing your mic? That'd be great. Thank you.
Say who you are and
Hi, how are you? Yes, my name is Valeria Lishenko, and that's my twin sister, Anna Lishenko. So, my question is, before, lots of people were mentioning that marker art market is kind of like not in the best time, but if we'll check religion market or mental health market, it's actually growing. And my question is there a possibility to see art market differently and go back in time when people were healing themselves with the art? So because people still looking for answers, what is real, what is not, where's the God, and all this stuff. So there is a hope that if the buyers will think how to heal the society through the art, we can bring people back to the art. Thank you.
I don't have a mic, so I can't answer.
Sorry, Josh. There you go.
Three. I mean, there's art, and then there's the art market, and they don't all work in the same motions at each time. They're not completely aligned. So something can be great art and sell for a lot of money, and something can be terrible art and sell for a lot of money, and some shit art doesn't sell, and some great art doesn't sell. So I think that the question there is real about art, but when we talk about the art market, everybody actually really means, what about my stuff? And that's
Yeah, I know. I think, we're talking about the distributive mechanism of how art is consumed and circulated, but I don't think any of us got into this because we first and foremost were interested in the market. We got into it because we love art. And, I try my best as an advisor to work with people who are propelled first and foremost by passion. I make it a point to not work with people who are looking at art purely from a speculative or investment standpoint.
unless they're multi-billionaires.
Yeah, I mean, there are certain examples. But, the truth is, I find in many cases the art that performs the best in the market, especially amongst younger artists, tends to be the most uninspiring and kind of derivative. So I'm really not great at picking market winners because I tend to sort of find it rather banal. And the truth is, there's, going back to what you were saying, Josh, about people wondering.
I'm not the only one who sucked at that.
Yeah, well, I'd like to think I suck intentionally. But what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. No, that's fine.
Give it to Todd.
Todd, you speak.
In terms of art and healing, you have to understand that art initially, the concept of art that we know of it today, which is it's an image of a thing which we put on the wall, or it's a sculpture and we look at the thing and we get some sort of aesthetic relationship to the thing, is only about 500 years old. That's it. When you go back further in time, when you look at art of Greco-Roman times, or you look at Egyptian art of antiquity, not only did they not have the concept of art as we're discussing it now in their field of vision, they didn't even have a word for art. It does not exist in the lexicon at all, period. So art, as we understand it, functioned radically different for different people at different times. It's been held up in front of armies in times of war. It has been used to heal at other times. It's been used to curse people at other times. It's been used to try and make women fertile, at certain times, or not make them fertile at certain times. It's had a lot of different use values throughout its history. And at one point, when an artist was making an image of Christ on the cross suffering for a church, they weren't making an image of Christ. They believed that they were actually creating it was a recreation of that literal God on the cross. And when people came and prayed to that effigy they were making, their prayers would actually be answered. They were communicating with the Christ through that object. And now we look at the object and it's just like an aestheticized thing, and we like it for this reason, or we don't like it for that reason, or whatever. But so our entire relationship over centuries and millennium has changed radically to art. So there may be some people today who make art who are making art with the primary thrust of, quote, being, it's a healing something. But I think most of the art that we're all talking about in the room today, it just has a completely different use value, different application, has nothing to do with that whatsoever. And it's not like it's going to transfer back to that. You'd have to start by making art that deals with those issues and not the issues that we're discussing here in the room today. So it's just two different things.
I have a quick question. I wonder if one or several of you could speak to the, it's an art market adjacent question, but to sort of art advisory and art consulting as a profession. Because I know when I was coming up, we studied, you did a master's or a PhD in art history. I don't remember people sort of aspiring to be advisors. And I'm just wondering if you guys could speak to the evolution of that profession and I guess its relationship to the art market, which I understand you guys have the disdain for it, but it is also very much a part of, from what I understand, the profession.
As the oldest one, I'll go first. So I had a gallery in 1985, and there were two art advisors in America. Okay, there was Estelle Schwartz, and there was and she would walk in and she would come in and she'd look at it and talk about the work in a deep level. Then she'd come in the next day with 20 people and she'd stand up on a table and say, "You can have this, you can't." Okay, and then there was Carol Goldberg, who had a great collection, and she bought for herself first and then for her clients. And that was the entire world of art advisors pretty much in America. 1805, I think we were at the first Freeman sale. Probably. Yeah. I know I was. Yeah. Todd, you saw the catalog. And now who came up with the term gmail.com art advisors? That's where we've gotten to. I'll let you guys take it from the OG.
I just wanted to say something that was so great. Estelle Schwartz, for those of you who don't know, was a one-of-a-kind, I think she's passed away, but she was from Long Island, and she had this accent, which I loved. And she would come with her bobbed blonde hair, and she'd come with very short skirts. I mean, her age, probably a little short, but she rocked it, good for her. And she would come in with her minions, so to speak, all these women, and it would be like, I was talking to Jeff Koons, and Jeff Koons said to me, he said, "Estelle, you are a genius." That is what Jeff Koons said to me. I loved her. That's the way she spoke. There was just something about her, but boy, did she have a great eye. Holy smokes. What a brilliant woman.
Shitty art advisor, but a great woman. Great eye.
Yeah, incredible. In terms of the professionalization, to make this real short, look, it happened when there was money in the game. That's really what it comes down to, right? When you could print up a business card that said art advisor and suddenly understand that you could make a lot of money, that's when a lot of people entered the field.
But in defense of art advisors, which I'm not always in defense of them, and I am one, but I do think a good art advisor can do the due diligence for you. I was thinking back to some projects that we've had, when a client, for example, wanted to buy a Castellani, which is a white painting that has some projections, and there were so many on the market. They were different dates, different sizes, different condition. What we did for our clients was we did lots and lots of research. We talked to the Castellani Foundation. We talked to a lot of people. We uncovered differences between all of these paintings on the market that I think it just took so much time. So a good advisor, I think, can almost just do the work for you.
But diligence assumes that you've already made a decision. You've already have a direction. Directionally, you're already.
That's one example. Exactly. Right. And as we were all talking earlier, an art advisor can also steer you. But I think, we do the same thing. We do education for sometimes up to 2 years before people buy things. There's no rule. But I think a good art advisor will help you understand how to educate yourself. And then you'll feel ready to make a leap and buy something. And it might be a mistake later, whatever. But the reality is, I think it's education, helping you navigate the pricing structure, which, coming back to the banana, and I'll let that one go, but it is nuts, right? There's no sense to why one thing is worth way more than another thing.
And the other component is access many
access,
times, which
yeah.
is a really crucial component. Like a good advisor, I would say a good advisor, is somebody who has a long and profound series of relationships with auction house specialists, gallerists, private dealers, and collectors around the world. And so the ability that they have first to even access things of exceptional quality is something that a person just entering the market would, it doesn't matter how much money you're worth, that's not the issue. Many times, as an example, I also work in the old master arena, okay? Now, it doesn't matter how much money you have, and very little of the good stuff even gets to auction. It stays in the Schloss or the castle or whatever, and it's been in that Schloss or castle for centuries. But one day, probably they feel they need to sell something and monetize because they have taxes to pay and there's familial issues. So they're going to sell this one rare thing. Well, what do? They decide who they want to call, and they call up that person. And they say, we're ready to sell this thing. In the case of a particular work that I knew of that had been sitting in England for hundreds of years, I stayed in touch with that couple for, it was 8 or 9 years, okay? And I would see them at TFAF fair, or I would see them at an auction and just say, hi, how are you? And just stay in their line of vision. Not for any specific client, just stay in their line of vision. And one day, 8 or 9 years, if you ever want to sell that thing, let me know. And keep it very casual. You don't want to be too needy, but you also want to make sure it's a balancing act, kind of thing, and everybody's different. And then one day I got the call. And if I had been second in line, it doesn't matter. Being in second line is as good as being 1,000 in second line. You either get the phone call first or you don't in cases like that, which is the access component. And so I got the call, and they were like, we're ready to sell this, and you've been really great about staying in touch with us, but not impinging on our privacy. You have 24 hours. This is the price. That's it. So I had the client for that. I called them up. I just said, da-da-da. I got the call. They knew I'd been on this thing like doggedly, like a dog with a bone, for years. And they were like, great. It only took 8 or 9 years to get to the deal-making component of that, which took all of 24 hours, and it was a single call. But it's because I was the first call. And that's what an art advisor does at the end of the day.
I think, the notion of an advisor or collectors paying someone for, for education, access, and connoisseurship has existed for centuries in one form or another. The professionalization of it, I think, really takes shape in the 80s. And when I think about, the various sort of power structures or actors in the art market, galleries obviously have great relationships with collectors and work closely with collectors, and there's certainly plenty of instances of major collections that were built in the latter half of the 20th century under the advice of gallerists and dealers. But a gallerist, their responsibility and their client really is the artist. I mean, they're especially in a primary market setting. I mean, they're working on behalf of the artist, and that's why works are consigned in, and typically proceeds of a sale are split 50-50. An auction house has a fiduciary obligation to maximize the price for the seller. So if you just think about, as the art market became larger in terms of the optionality and the offerings and more expensive, it would stand to reason that collectors would look for a professional whose interests would be aligned with their own. And access is a key, education is key, but the other thing is just, quite frankly, figuring out what to say no to and trying to mitigate mistakes. And mistakes can mean a lot of different things. Mistakes aren't simply buying things that depreciate, but buying things that you regret and can't get out of. I think advising is such an amorphous field, and one of the real challenges to it is the fact that there are no barriers to entry, and there are no, formal qualifications or credentialing, which poses tons of issues, both in terms of how qualified an advisor is, but also how ethical and transparent they are, because we're dealing in a market that is unregulated, is opaque, and there's information asymmetry, And with a lack of intrinsic or fundamental value to art, you have this real asymmetry between the notion of price and value. So a lot of what I think we all do is trying to reconcile those two realities.
How do you could almost do our marketing. The Baer Faxt, that's us. We say don't transact without the Baer Faxt. But what we say all the time is we provide access and knowledge. And you need both. And that's what we hope to do. What I would also like to say, Betsy, is I left out probably the single most important figure about advisory was Jeffrey Deitch. And with what he did at Citibank, changed the game completely.
Yeah. So 45 years ago, Jeffrey and Patrick Cooney together founded Citi Art Advisory. And, they saw that clients were spending a lot of money on art without objective advice. To my knowledge, we're the only existing fiduciary art advisor. And that means there's a lot of compliance work that we have to do that clients don't see. It's around conflicts of interest. It's around, making sure that you're being transparent, objective. And I think everyone on this panel is, but we have to deal with Reg 9. And it's, one of those things, I think it's a value to clients, but it is in an unregulated market. One of the things actually we're seeing now is this heightened awareness of sanctions and AML screening and how that's coming into play in the US. It's already happening in Europe. It's important there. But I think, as the market becomes more and more regulated, you need someone who can help you navigate all of those things because it's part of it, unfortunately.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes. Two hands. All right. Let's go.
This is Derek Gilman. This is just a quick observation. And we've talked a lot about the contemporary, and Todd made a slight oversight, and I just want to correct it because we're standing at the end of a very long tradition. And in fact, the idea of art the idea of fine art as a defined object, as a defined commodity, was well established in China by the 8th century at least, going back a couple earlier centuries, with an art market. So we didn't talk about the Chinese market. We always talk about the contemporary market. It's been around for a very long time, and we stand at the end of a lot of very good collectors and some very robust thinkers, and I think our obligation is to think about how we take it on. So, thank you.
Thank you. I love it. I was going to say yes.
You guys are investment managers and investment advisors in an esoteric field, and that's necessary. It's a good thing. It informs the buyers. I'm a lawyer in the field. I'm also managing the estate of, tempted to say a previously important artist, but I think the artist is still relevant. It's my job to reestablish the relevance and consolidate the legacy. And there are two tyrannies in the market. One is the branding of the artist, right? And you're either, your Katz, your Basquiat, your Wesselman, you got a name, your Warhol, your brand. And your art is commodified and fungible, and you can price it up and down the ladder according to market comps. The other tyranny, which affects you guys, regardless of your affinity, your connoisseurship, is for the financial investor, and that's a good chunk of this market. And even the best collectors who have the best eyes, and I deal with them, are dictated by return on investment and resale. I think you said that. And so the second tyranny is the resale price in the auction market. And the first thing, or maybe the second or the third, but the go, no-go decision on the purchase or the advice to purchase or decline is often based on the auction record. And that auction record, is determined not necessarily by the quality of the art, but by the financial support of a dealer in the primary market, and whether that dealer has succeeded in constructing a network of interested buyers and clients. So there's a very, so there's a couple tyrannies on the market: branding, resale, secondary market. And secondary, and that leaves off where you guys come in, is access and what's the sense of the pricing on the primary market, or the dealer market, if you will. So you guys navigate an interesting space. And good luck to you. I appreciate you.
Make a comment. It's like, man, that dealer, he's propping up the market. That's so bad. And then, what do you mean the dealer didn't prop up that market? It's like, I bought one. Why isn't he buying all 30 of those out there? What the hell's the matter with him? So this tyranny is more complex than that.
Yeah, I think there are very few dealers and gallerists, with the exception of a couple in this neighborhood, who are actively deploying capital to defend markets and buy inventory, especially at auction.
But there's a network of favored clients who does.
Sure, but
It's their money, though.
Yeah, I think, look, there are a lot of things to say about that. One thing is, in terms of ROI and notions of unrealized gains in artwork, what happens the vast majority of times when you help an individual build a collection and you get to a certain point where they filled up their walls or they want to think about editing the collection, is they say, I'd be happy to part with this, this, and this. What would it sell for? And you show them what it probably would fetch, and it's uninspiring. They say, well, why? I'm like, well, for the same reason you want to sell it, that's the reason why other people don't want it. If you wanted to sell this, this, and this, we can make you 5X. Well, why would I sell that? I love it. Well, that's exactly why, But one of the challenges is the auction, in terms of price discovery, and don't want to get too esoteric, certainly towards the tail end of this on a Friday night, but galleries, private dealers can hold material for a longer period of time. They're working on a posted price system where they just need one person to hit their asking price. Whereas at auction, you're dealing with price construction from the buy side. So if, especially when attention spans are limited, there's so much material out there. If the depth of bidding is really thin, and there's only two individuals, and say it's Todd and I competing for something, and the estimate's 50 to 100,000. And for me, buying it at 50 would be a stretch in my budget, but I would love to have it if I could have it at that. And Todd's willing to spend $200,000 for it. Well, it's probably just going to sell for 55 or 60. So, auction is inherently biased downwards because it has more to do with the underbidder that anchors that price than. So, auction prices are 9 times out of 10 trail and are below private prices.
But they become harder.
Yeah, because they're the only public pricing record in a market.
That's actually a very good point. I think that's the other thing a good advisor does, is they know the private data, right?
Which is really crucial, because the biggest error somebody can make is like, go to ArtNet, I'm interested in buying or selling a certain artist in a certain kind of work by that artist, certain size and quality, whatever, and then they just look up the comps. And they don't know this one had a damage in the lower left quadrant. This one had failed for some other reason altogether. This one had an authenticity question. This one was a good sale, and they just look at the comps and they go, oh, well, but the comps, it's like looking at an iceberg. You see the 10% above, floating above, you don't know the 90, what the shape of that iceberg is. So when people try to comp things like this, they usually wind up doing it poorly. And a good advisor, though, is going to have seen those things at the auction preview because maybe they were reviewing it for someone else. Or it's also like when we go to a preview, I look at tons of stuff that even,
Well, or you know who to ask, right? Like
Yeah.
maybe I wasn't in the market for a certain thing, and so I didn't know what all those comps meant, but I know who to go to.
She knows who to ask for that banana. She knows.
and-
She knows who to ask for that.
And the other thing is, if you take out remove the outlier of the quote unquote Da Vinci that Christie's sold, the top prices achieved in reselling artwork are all private, right? The top pictures that come to market. I mean, Todd's anecdote about chasing this old master of painting. It's like that's how it happens. When something is really great. There's a classic story about Ronald Lauder. He says, he's talked about 3 categories of artwork. There's the oh my, and the oh my God, and he only buys the oh my God. And when the Adele Black Power, the Klimt came to market, and he found out about it. He said, I'll take it. And they said, well, we haven't quoted a price yet. So it doesn't matter. For those extraordinary objects that come to market with discretion, the asking price is almost irrelevant for the people who want them and can afford them. That's why, so many of the comps, even lower down in the market, are not publicly available, and therefore it's the job of the advisor to kind of fill out that whole market context.
But that's also because the art advisor knows that there'll be a forthcoming exhibition at a museum.
So yeah, trading on privileged information.
Access and knowledge.
Yeah.
But let me make two comments. Let's see if I can remember both. I spend more than an amount of time in my advisory role talking about money, okay? But I'm not an investment manager, and we would all take umbrage it being called that, and we're not. So we work with collections that might be worth a lot of money, but one thing is that we're not, and we don't pretend to be, we're not investment managers.
Yeah, I'm a cost center.
Costco?
No, I'm a cost center. As my dad once told me, I'm very good at spending other people's money. I must get that from my mom.
OPM.
Well, folks, Josh, Alex, Todd, Betsy, thank you so much again for your participation and time this evening. It was really fantastic. Thank you very, very much. Thank you. For everybody else, please stay with us. We've got a little bit longer. The bar will be open until 8 o'clock. I wish. Thank you so much for coming and have a good night.